Hello, and welcome to Unsheathed with your hosts, Kyell and K.M. We hope that you enjoy the program. Please stick around afterwards. There'll be cake and blowjobs.
Hi, welcome to Unsheathed number 42. We're the writers with the answer this week, I believe.
Or if we don't, we're doing something wrong.
I'm Kyell Gold, the Answer Fox.
I am Cam Hirosaki, the self-questioning otter.
And we have with us in our discreet mountain bunker location a familiar otter.
I'm not Tube.
That's right. Tube's a dragon, I think.
I'm Ron Burgundy.
I'm Kyell Gold, and you're not.
I don't have a
that's
nod.
Dating myself. Welcome, Not Tube.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
And,
something to suck on.
Kid is
Passing out things to suck
Kid
on.
is passing out things for the cast to put in their muzzles.
Yeah. Oh, that is good.
So episode 42 is just going to be a lot of sucking sounds, apparently.
It just came off right in my mouth.
But that's
It is softer than I expected.
now that's a flexible otter.
There's video evidence.
We're yeah. Pixar didn't happen. We're wow. I'm all not sure what to say now.
Yeah, don't leave that on the table. It'll make a mess.
It's still in its wrapper. Well, we're here to read a couple letters, but thought we'd go around and just sort of talk about what we've been doing. I think the otter's enjoying his pop a little bit too much over there, so
No such thing.
I'm going to start. I'm still working on revisions for the Out of Position sequel, which has a provisional title right now, and I'm not going to tell y'all what it is, but I should be able to send it to the people who have kindly volunteered to waste most of the months of June reading it in the next week, and then I can stop thinking about it and start focusing on other things like the extra Out of Position story that I was supposed to write, and the extra Bridges story I was supposed to write, and the other things that I'm supposed to write for other people, like I owe Camp Farrell a con book story. So
you can like combine these two stories that you owe and have like something where, you know, Lee goes back in time to when before he was together with Dev and ends up like getting drilled by Hayward or something.
Actually, I've never really situated the Bridges universe chronologically with the Out of Position universe, so that could happen earlier. Could be happening while Lee was in college.
It might happen in my fanfic, but probably not.
You're too busy to write a fanfic.
I almost certainly am. Thank you for that segue. So, right now, my first draft for my miniature novel, Summerhill, is sitting in its drawer, as it dutifully should. In the meantime, I'm happy to report that, yes, I did in fact start working on my secret project again, and I proved to Kyell that I was, so now Kit won't beat me.
Oh, yeah, just me.
But, yes, no, I've successfully incentivized myself on that.
Oh, God, you did not just say incentivized.
God damn it, did I? Fuck. I had several people ask, what's your secret project? And I'm like, oh, come on.
If I told you, it wouldn't be a secret.
If I wanted you to know, I would just tell you, and I wouldn't call it my secret project.
Yeah, for sure.
You wouldn't call what your secret project?
Touché.
Ah, dang.
He needs to have more wine in it before that'll work.
I have plenty of wine in me today, too. I think I made a mistake wanting this to be the serious episode.
And what's Not Tube been up to over there?
I started working on another short story, which is currently working title 6 Classical Pieces. I'm excited about working on this, and I'm also final drafting my little mini novel, which will be published through Fur Planet, and it's called Smiley and the Hero.
Awesome.
So, looking forward to finally having that as finished as it's going to get.
Cool. So am I. I very much enjoyed the draft I read, so
Oh, thanks.
best of luck with it.
Thanks.
And remember, as long as you're over 40,000 words, you qualify as novel, at least as far as the Ursa Majors are concerned.
Yeah, this one's 60, so it's as long as a James Bond novel.
And speaking of the Ursa Major Awards, congratulations to our very own Kyle Gold for being the winningest person ever in the awards circle now.
Thank you.
That chump Stan Sakai doesn't have nothing on you.
Yeah, you're the Meryl Streep of the Ursa Majors.
No,
Actually, Meryl Streep's only had been nominated like 15 times, but only won twice.
Okay, you're the reverse Meryl Streep.
It's like, my goal is to be the Meryl Streep of the Ursa Majors.
I'll be like the Jack Nicholson of the Ursa Majors, maybe.
It's my current plan to off you so that I can win sometime.
Well, you can be the Susan Lucci.
Actually, I have a suspicion I'll be the Marissa Tomei.
Oh. Ooh.
What, have... I don't think Jack Palance can read your name by mistake. I think he's dead now.
We just proved our homosexuality there, I think.
Yeah. Oh my God. Oscar trivia.
Who doesn't love it?
Oscar trivia plus Marissa Tomei.
Meryl Streep is divine.
Oh God, I loved Marissa Tomei and My Cousin Vinny, but she was even better in the bedroom that year. Holy cow. All right, so football doesn't start for another few months, but...
nice try.
I'm saying you're dating yourself and you're gaying yourself.
Well, that's good, because if I were to date myself, I'd have to be gay, otherwise it wouldn't really work.
That's also appearing in my fanfic.
It is your turn to write a story, so I should be careful what I say here. I'm going to come in one day and you and Kit are going to be grinning at me and there's going to be words on the screen and it's all going to be my dialogue with myself and your story about me going back in time to seduce my high school self or something, and Kit's going to be like...
You're doing my job for me here, man.
I'd read that story.
Leave some of the fun with it.
Your older self getting progressively more traumatized as he does stuff to his younger self.
And Kit's going to be like, read the description of your high school self again. That was hot.
I was thinking like how that would work, like if you were like really young and you didn't know yet that you enjoyed certain things and your older self was making you do them. So you'd be really scared only to find out that you liked them.
But
oh my God, that's actually kind of hot.
But then you would have...
I'm a pervert.
Good night, everybody.
I told you, this is the episode where we have the answer.
The answer to would you do yourself is yes.
But the funny thing is, the more you taught yourself at the younger age, the more you would have known that much further back in your past. So your older self would be much
even more
and
experienced
have more things that they would have found out that he knew.
And it can change in real time.
And I think eventually you'd end up like discovering that you really liked snuff, and that would be the end of that story.
It's like the quantum singularity of sex.
It'd be like the closing episode of Star Trek Next Generation, All Good Things.
Wow, you brought Star Trek geekery into this.
I had to derail it somehow.
You had an email, right?
we did have an email. There was something else I was going to talk about. Yeah, I wanted to say thank you to all the folks who voted for the Ursa Majors. The three of us here are a little disappointed that X didn't do better, but I'm always very grateful to the people that bothered to write in and vote and have done so for like the past 5 or 6 years. And the award really is voted on by the people. So thank you to all you folks out there, and write to the Ursa Major Committee and demand that they institute an award next year for Best Podcast so that we can lose that to Notcast.
We so would, wouldn't we?
Oh, we totally would.
But it's an honor just to be nominated.
Absolutely. Because there's only like 10 or 11 furry podcasts. Although actually I think there's like 2 or 3 more. Hirosaki-san and I got a request to be interviewed on one that's only been out for a couple months, so...
Better than half. That's the mission statement.
Yes.
It's like taking the SATs.
Not at all, actually. I mean...
They change how the SATs work nowadays anyway.
You know, if the SATs were voted on popularly like the Ursa Majors were, I wouldn't have gotten into college. But we have an email from Pyro. I don't have a good segue to that one. But our faithful and constant writer in Pyro has written, with a new handle he's trying out.
Yes.
I'm keen to hear it.
He says, "Sup, guys? I got a
Sup.
comment recently on the end. Yo, dog. I heard you like
you
emails.
like pyro.
So I put some
some
email in
pyro
your
in
email
your
so you
email.
can podcast while you podcast."
I'd never heard of that internet meme until you showed it to me.
Now you're going to hear it everywhere.
Mostly because I hang out with you a lot, and you're going to keep saying it.
I got a comment recently on the androgynous robot fox story. Reason this is something significant is that the commenter suggested that I, or somebody, I'm not sure, read it to be put on the Unsheathed DVD, or whatever you got going. Thoughts on this? Trying these out. P-Fang. P.S. I kind of dig some kind of amalgamation of them. Reason why I asked you guys for thoughts concerning a name is that I wanted something more authorly than Pyro Wolf or Pyro Stinger Wolf or something. P-Fang is corny. Oh. Then why did you use it?
Well, he said he's trying it out.
I guess he's deemed it unworthy.
If you want something more authorly, how about like Ernest Hemingway? That's pretty authorly.
Or John
Ernest
Steinbeck.
Hemingway.
Or John Steinbeck, yeah. Or Gertrude Steinbeck. I've flustered the other otter this time. That's kind of cool. I think that would be a cool idea. I mean, Pyro. I seem to recall from the X podcast we did with Notcast that Pyro has a pretty good speaking voice. If he wants to give a try at reading it, if he has recording software at home, tell him to give it a try, and well, we could tell him right now, Pyro, give it a try. Send in your recording to us, and we'll see if we like it and deem it worthy to put on our next DVD, which we are assembling. So you should do that in the next week or two.
Also, send me an androgynous robot fox. I'll give you the my address in a private email.
Actually, you could probably send 2 or 3 over. We'd certainly find uses for them.
Oh yes. Oh yes, indeed.
All right. I don't know if Not Too Bad has anything to contribute to that, but...
No.
All right, then. Our next email is from Storm Kitty. Storm Kitty says, "It's been a while since I've written you guys, but I thought I'd weigh in on the question of editing and grammatical correctness while RPing. I personally try to be grammatically correct while I roleplay, even when I'm in the middle of a hot and heavy scene. I may be a little less careful than usual about proofreading for typos, about making sure I didn't repeat words or phrases, but it seems to work well enough most of the time. Sometimes I catch myself getting a little carried away with backing up and retyping a section of a pose to make it better, and have to remind myself that there's another person or persons waiting for my pose, or persons. So I have to force myself to declare it good enough so I can move on and we can keep the scene going at a reasonable pace. I also prefer to roleplay with others who can use correct spelling and grammar most of the time, but it's not a deal breaker. If they're creative enough and would enjoy doing a scene that plays to my kinks, I'm not going to let some problems with their spelling and grammar get in the way of that, at least to a point. Speaking of writing and role-playing, you pointed out on one recent episode that people who would like to write but don't have time often need to decide their priorities and make a decision what is more important to them. In my case, one of the things that eats into my writing time is doing this sort of role-playing. But all is not lost, as perhaps there is a lesson in this for me. One of the things I struggle with in my writing is that I can easily get into too much of a perfectionist mode, being unsure how I want to say something and how best to move ahead with a scene, and I find myself getting stuck on the same couple of paragraphs sometimes for an hour or more. The fact that this tends to happen is one of the reasons I have trouble convincing myself to write instead of doing other things. The lesson? Maybe at moments like these it would help if I shift into my role-playing mindset where you have others waiting on your reply in order to make myself worry less about getting it perfect and more about getting something down in a timely manner to keep things moving forward. I kind of want to break in here and say that's absolutely a great lesson to take away from role-playing and apply to writing. We say it over and over again, your first draft is not your last draft.
Yeah, don't worry about making it perfect, just write it.
Exactly. So, absolutely. And I remember years and years ago RPing with someone who consistently misspelled tongue.
Like tunge?
Yes, actually. Which, you know, eventually you would think you'd get used to, but you don't.
No.
Anyway, back to Storm Kitty. Finally, personal observation about what makes a story good. I've read a lot of less than well-written stories and still enjoyed them. The acid test seems to be, do I care about the characters? A good example of this is Trouble's Tales by Kitiara. By editorial standards, this story series fails in areas such as continuity and consistency, as well as having style problems such as not breaking paragraphs between lines of dialogue by different characters. But it still works for me because it succeeds at making me care about what happens to the characters. It also helps that it has a lot of hot and kinky sex scenes in it. By the same token, a story isn't going to work for me if I don't care about the characters, no matter how well it is written objectively speaking. To your punctuation question, I never put a punctuation mark immediately following a URL. Same goes for an email address, unless I can enclose the URL in HTML, BB code, or some similar markup that enables me to exclude the punctuation mark. If I need to punctuate and I'm not using markup, I always put a space in between. That's enough for one letter. Keep up the good work, and I look forward to listening to more of your podcasts. Storm Kitty.
Kid took my muzzle toy away. I just want to say that.
I still have mine.
Show off.
So I thought the personal observation about what makes a story good was an interesting point to discuss. For a lot of people, it seems to be, do they care about the characters? I think, I'm not sure if for me it was having read a lot of poorly written stuff, or if it was studying writing and pushing myself to do better. But there came a certain point when I find, if something is poorly written or grammatically poor, has style issues or continuity or consistency issues, I'm taken right out of the story. And it doesn't matter if I care about the characters. I don't want to read anymore. Yeah,
I don't remember who was saying it, and I wish I could credit them, but they were saying that seeing grammatical or spelling errors in a story is like bad notes. And I think that's really right. Like, if you go to a concert and, they're playing a song that you really like, no matter how much you like that song, if they play a note wrong, if they hit it wrong, it pulls you out of the music.
I think that was me, although I might have been quoting someone else, but I know I've used that analogy.
Yeah, it might have been. But, I think that's really accurate and a really useful way to look at it. People have said, when writing, as long as you get the meaning across, that's okay. And it's not. When you're reading something, you're trying to experience artistic expression, and you're trying to experience talent. And if somebody doesn't evince that, then it pulls you out of that experience.
I think that a lot of times when you sort of get the attitude of, it doesn't need to be well written as long as, it's a good story, there's sort of like an apologist attitude to that. And I find that, if you bought a book off of a bookshelf by somebody that you didn't know, and it was like riddled with errors, you wouldn't have so much of a, tolerance for it than if you knew it was just like a fan created piece of work.
And I think there's something else too, that there is at the same time a ton of furry writing out there, and also not a lot of furry writing. There's a ton because, on Furry So Star or whatever it's called now, there's hundreds of thousands of stories. There's fan fictions all over the place, and yet a lot of these stories have fans because the material is furry, because it's furry characters. But at the same time, if you're liking a story only because of the characters, then your likes probably are going to be kind of specific. Like, you're going to like stories about gay foxes, and then that narrows down the selection quite a bit.
Right.
Or you're going to like stories about otters, or, our friend who likes stories about lions. In a sense, when you find a story that has those things that you like about it, you tend to overlook a lot because there's not a lot of stories like that. If you were just a fan of science fiction, you can afford to be less or more discriminating because there's a lot of science fiction out there. And you don't have to like a story just because it has a spaceship in it, because there's a ton of stories with spaceships, so you can only like the good ones.
Yeah. Gay fox stories, markedly fewer. And I think that you're sort of selling yourself short if you don't demand better quality of something just because there's not a lot of it. I think that as, almost every, site I know that hosts stories, they allow for, the readers to leave comments. And, you certainly want to be encouraging, but you also want to encourage people to get better. And if there's a way you can do that, you shouldn't squander that opportunity, especially if you're into something that's really specific and only a few people are writing it. If none of them are any good at it, well, somebody needs to step up to that.
Well, and here's one of the things, one of the reasons that it pulls me out of a story if I'm reading it. It has a lot of bad grammar and spelling and that sort of thing. Because when I come across that, what that says to me is that this story and these characters are not important enough to the writer. They're not important for the writer to make sure that the words that they're using are the right ones, and that that they deserve attention and care and respect when they're putting these words onto the paper. I mean, or at least before they're publishing them. So if they're not important to the writer, why are they important to me?
And for me, what happens is I've tried to use several kinds of analogies, and I don't think I've found anything that really works well yet. But we talk a lot about writing, and that the whole goal of learning to write well is to eliminate as many barriers as possible between the reader and your story. And grammar, syntax, continuity, consistency, all of that stuff, all of those are barriers. If you write according to the rules of grammar, so the reader doesn't have to think, oh, is that correct? Is that the right spelling of that word? Who's talking now? Didn't this character die 2 chapters ago? If you follow all those rules, so the reader doesn't have to think about the words on the page, they can focus their attention and get lost in the characters and in the story. And that's what I object to, is not so much... I mean, I get some of that the writer just doesn't care enough to learn to write well. But more than that, what I get is these are words on a page, and then I don't get lost in the story. I don't get lost in the characters. I kind of see what the writer's trying to do, but I'm much more aware of the writer. And I'm aware that this is something that a person is trying to tell me about, as opposed to this is something that's happening that I'm reading, that I'm learning about through the medium of the words.
Right.
You can even, make analogies, to art, which is something that, all of us are really familiar with. Where if you, are drawing a picture that supposedly, is supposed to look like something it's supposed to look, like, hey, here's like, attractive people having hot sex, but if your anatomy is all wrong, that's gonna throw me out of it.
Like if the balls are too far back in the hot shower scene.
That's one example, but no, I was thinking, like, there's this one artist, I'm not going to name names, but there's one artist I know who is reasonably popular, and they draw a lot of porn, and they have, like, a ton of fans, and every time they post a picture, it's just like, oh my god, your anatomy is so lazy, and that's all I can focus on was, your anatomy drives me up the wall, and I don't even draw, and I'm seeing this. Yeah, and it's just like, and you can tell that it's just like, well, I don't need to bother with anatomy because I'm drawing dicks going into people, and so people will like what I draw. And at that point, you're not going to challenge yourself to get any better because the quality bar has been set and you're meeting it, and there's no reason for you to improve.
Yeah, and part of that, and this applies to writing too, is that people. This is kind of sliding off the topic we were discussing, but people don't demand better.
Right. And I think the point I was trying to make earlier is that I think that we owe it to ourselves to demand better.
Yeah.
Especially because we're a niche audience. Like, we basically cater to ourselves. If we're not going to hold ourselves... To your
story again.
No, if we're not...
I misspelled it. I was demanding butter.
Like, if we're not going to make ourselves better, who else is going to?
No, nobody.
Like I've said before, like the phrase like by furry standards like drives me up the wall. I don't want to ever have to hear that again of, oh, like this is pretty well written by furry standards. Like, no, it should just be well written. Like, forget the fact that it's about animals. Forget the fact that it's written by somebody who pretends to be an animal person. Good writing should be good writing.
We don't have to suck.
Yeah, we don't. And
I don't know why we think we do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do, but that's just because, Kit makes me. But,
and I do because Kyle writes stories where other people make me.
Well, if we have to, then we should suck better than other people. Like, can we agree on that?
Yes, absolutely. And here, Saki, you
and
love
the
it.
Fox put the cock in his muzzle, and he sucked. It was Mas Mejor.
No mas. Sorry, that was out of line. But his other point was an interesting one, where he says, if I care about the characters, I care about the story. And one of the things that we'd kind of been discussing on and off was what happened. We hear a lot of people, like I used to get feedback on Waterways, and I'm going to try to say this without spoiling any of the plot for people, but where people said, well, I love the book, but the main character drove me crazy with this one thing because I really, really thought he should do it and he didn't.
Oh, yes.
And so, and I think as we were talking about a little bit, when talking about this email before, that there's a distinction between a character that's poorly written and a well-written character who does things you don't want them to do.
Like, in this case, like, oh my god, why did he do that? I wouldn't have done that. It's like, yes, but you're not him, and he's not you.
Right. And not too bad some examples as well, I believe.
I was thinking of, like, one book that I read recently that I recognize is of great quality and everyone loves it but me, is Kazuo Ishiguro's Never Let Me Go.
And we are big fans of Ishiguro on the podcast here. Ishiguro-sama.
I read this book. I recognize that it's very well written, very well constructed. But the main characters I want to punch with my everything. They're just... they're so frustrating. And there's this... I think I'm supposed to get frustrated with them, so I'm kind of pleased about that it made me have this emotional reaction. But at the same time, the frustration with them was so great that through the whole book, I just wanted to strangle them. And by the end, I didn't really care what happened to them because I was so frustrated with them.
But at the same time, as you said, you still recognize the quality of the writing in the
Absolutely,
book.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, let's face it, we don't always like what's good, and we don't always dislike what's bad. That's okay.
Very true.
Quality and entertainment are not the same thing.
My famous example of that is Disney's Robin Hood movie. It's not a good movie, but I still really enjoy it.
Wow, there are already torches and pitchforks outside. How did it...
They didn't find our mountain.
I was going to mention The Rock. It is not a good film, but it is a great movie.
I like the Roland or the Devlin and Emmerich version of Godzilla.
I've never seen that.
That's a lot of fish.
It's a terrible movie. It's terrible. I like it anyway. I recognize that it's bad. I don't recommend it to anyone else, but at the same time, I enjoy watching it.
I was going to say, and the point he was saying, as long as I care about the characters and identify with the characters, I'll enjoy the story. My counterpoint to that would be Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. I care about all those characters. I don't give a shit about anything that happens in that book. Oh my god.
Well, at least like the first third or half of the book.
Yeah, it's just like, what does it have to do with anything? Oh, and also, it doesn't help because so many people are acting out of character in that book that I just want to hit them.
And you can not care about characters like a book anyway. American Psycho is a great example of that. Like,
I've not read
you read that
one.
book and there's not a likable person. I mean, it's uncomfortable to read all the way through, but that's kind of what pulls you through it. It's like climbing a mountain. You're like, when you get to the end, you're like, I did it! I made it all the way to the end! And it's, the quality is fantastic. You enjoy that part of it, but you don't like the characters, and you're not supposed to.
Yeah, or if anyone's ever seen Grave of the Fireflies, which is like, it starts by telling you this is going to be depressing as hell and end on a horrible note. And the tension in watching the movie isn't, how are they going to get through this? It's, when is it going to end so it doesn't get worse?
That's 2 hours of being kicked in the stomach.
Yeah, but it's really well done, and I wouldn't say I enjoy watching it, but I think it's a good movie, and I appreciate it on a very real level.
And one of my favorite examples of that is the movie Chicago, the musical, which won Best Picture a couple years back. Yeah. There is not a sympathetic character in that movie.
Not even John C. Reilly's character?
John C. Reilly's character is sort of sympathetic, but I also wanted him to man up and just, like, walk out of the movie halfway through. Do his musical number, and then get the hell out. Just say, this is... I'm he was a doormat. He was,
Yeah.
But the thing is, I think the enjoyment in Chicago doesn't come from identifying with the characters. It's the enjoyment you get from watching what outrageous things they're going to try to pull off next.
Well, and Chicago's,
Actually,
Chicago's a classic tragedy, too.
the enjoyment comes from watching Richard Gere dance and sing. But
I don't think that was in the original version.
I mean, with tragedies, you watch a character bring themselves down with their own flaws.
yeah,
Kit says it's not a tragedy. He disagrees with me.
well, because in the end they succeed.
But they're not happy.
That's all I think that
They're
Romeo and
as happy
Juliet.
as they're going to get.
Romeo and Juliet, there's like one sympathetic character in that, and that's Mercutio. And
Not
like
the nurse.
okay, the nurse too. She's a bit minor. But like all the main cast of Romeo and Juliet, it's just like, wow, you're all like either like really arrogant or really stupid or both, and like you all kind of get what you deserve.
Wow,
And it's-
that's harsh.
Well, it's.
What about Romeo and Juliet? They're kids in love.
I think I'm just annoyed at the fact that people use Romeo and Juliet as this like, you know, hallmark of like love when like the entire point was that it was just like, you know, fake childhood puppy love, and these people screwed up their like multiple people's lives with their silly infatuation. It's not meant to be this thing about like oh, it's so sweet. Like no, like look at what happens to these two people and everyone around them. It ends badly for everyone.
Yeah, it was actually more a play about sort of the stupidity of politics and feuds and
Yeah, and then at
whatnot,
the end, like the prince shows up and it's just like screw all y'all, and like end. It's just like okay.
he was sympathetic.
Yeah, I mean, and I like Romeo and Juliet. I think Romeo and Juliet's a pretty captivating story.
Good.
Okay.
I'm glad you like Shakespeare.
So
It's good of you to recognize that Shakespeare has like writing skills.
but that's a good example of a story where you dislike most of the characters, and I'll kind of agree with that. I mean, I don't know that I disliked Romeo and Juliet themselves. I was kind of, again, sort of like with John C. Reilly, I was kind of hoping that they would wise up and walk out of the play in the middle, but then I think
Yeah.
it would have been called something else.
I mean, they're both very immature, and they are clearly in over their heads and don't realize it.
They're kids, and
Yeah.
they're kind of stupid kids, but they're not.
They're well-meaning kids.
They're well-meaning, exactly. They're not like criminally stupid kids. Not like in the movie Kids, which was traumatic. And actually, that's a great example of a movie that was well done, and I hated everybody in it, and I wanted them all to die. And I never want to see that movie again.
But did you like the movie?
No.
Okay.
But it was well done.
That's kind of how I felt about Babel, where it's just like all this stuff is happening, and I'm not sure I care what happens to anyone in it.
Oh.
Yeah, see, I didn't think that was as good a movie, though.
Yeah.
Kids telling us to focus. I'm not sure on what.
Okay, so I think the idea here is, and I'll steer us back on track, so look out. I'm steering
Wow.
with my rudder.
The otter's
just-
putting us back on track.
Just being able to understand narrative structure and how it's supposed to work, and the building blocks that go into a story. We talk a lot on the show about editing and mechanics and, self-criticism and building up, rapport with other writers and like how to get your stuff together. But none of that really means anything if you don't know how to tell a story. Like you can be like a master of the English language, but if you don't know what goes into a story, then you're not going to be able to write worth anything.
And I've seen certain prominent people lately mention that that's not really so important, and I have to disagree.
Yeah.
I think that, okay, we've had a couple centuries now to learn how to write a novel, or to tell a short story, and the basic rules that people have come up with exist for a reason. They're not haphazard. They don't exist just because somebody wants to be authoritarian and say, this is how you do it because this is how I did it. They exist.
No, this is how you do it because the other way is jarring and disorienting.
Right.
Yeah.
People, you have to remember that writing is communication. There's an ear on the other end, or eyes.
Or multiple eyes, multiple ears.
And there was a book I was reading lately, and in the first chapter, the main character has what's actually like a pretty interesting problem, being put before them. And it's like, oh hey, like this is actually like a really neat conflict. I want to see what will happen with this. And before the end of chapter 1, it has been resolved. It's almost as if the author's like, well, I don't want my character to go through bad things. I don't want to do mean things to my character, so bang, okay, like problem solved. And I'm just looking at this, I'm like, you could easily carry this like even just this one point about like halfway through an entire novel, like there'd be a great like building block for conflict and tension, and it's just like, and you're like, oh, but like, oh, like this is my character, and like, I want them to be happy, so bang, I killed the problem in chapter 1. It's like, well, if you're going to kill the problem that early on, why introduce it in the first place?
Yeah, dramatic tension continues by pointedly not resolving the problem, by having chances to resolve it and then not doing it.
Yeah,
And And what's funny is,
which works great in Romeo and Juliet.
It sounds real plain and basic when we say it like this. Like, dramatic tension comes from having an unresolved conflict. Duh. I don't know how much more plainly you could say that. And yet I find when I'm doing first drafts, I have to consciously tell myself, draw this out. Because my instinct as a person is to say, oh, hey, there's this misunderstanding between me and, Not Tube. Well, I should go talk to him about it. I go, hey, Not Tube, I didn't mean to say that thing about otters. I don't really mean that about otters. I like otters. Some of my best friends are otters. And he would, punch me and then we'd be cool. But that wouldn't make a good story because it would be over. So you kind of have to say, all right, so what if, it was when I go to try to apologize, something else happens and, or we're prevented from doing something or other things complicate, which is what happens in Romeo and Juliet is, it would, if they had cell phones, that story would not have happened.
Oh, yeah.
But
because you need to have like messages like getting crossed and not reaching people in time. And yeah.
Exactly. And so they try to resolve conflicts, and in the course of trying to resolve conflicts, other people get killed, and then that becomes a source of conflict, and so on and so on and so on. And that's how you keep tension resolved. But at the same time, you don't want to make it so blatant that you're just drawing it out for story purposes to be like, well, that's ridiculous. They were in the same room and they were talking about it. Why didn't they just settle it right there? It has to be true to the characters.
Right.
I mean, like, if like the problem is with like a married couple that has like problems communicating, then yeah, maybe you can get away with them having a conversation and neither of them bringing it up.
Right.
But you can't do that for the entire length of the story without having something just finally, someone's going to break, something's got to give at some point. And
there's something about the fact that we exist in this kind of niche community, as we talked about earlier on in the show. Furries will like furry fiction because it's furry. And they're predisposed to liking it. They will forgive a lot.
Yeah.
You can put the exact same story in front of people, and probably I'm as guilty of this as anyone else. You could put the exact same story in front of someone, one star in a anthropomorphic fox, one just with regular people, and I will probably, on an emotional level, I will like the story with the fox better because I like fox people.
Yeah.
And I like to think that if you put a crappy fox story and a well-written human story in front of me, that I would like the human story a lot better, but I'd probably still feel a little affection if the fox story was even a little bit well done.
I was going to say, especially when it comes to furry stories and not drawing out tension as much as you need to, how many times have all of us read the story of, oh, I'm secretly gay, and I have a crush on this guy, but I can't talk to him, and okay, I will, and oh, wow, you're secretly gay too? And then, bing, let's have sex, everything's great, the end. It's just like...
I think I almost wrote that story.
Well, no, but... No, but you didn't not draw out the tension in it.
No, I know.
And also, the tension that you introduced was not about, oh, he would never like me, oh, look, he does, the end. I mean... Which, even if that were the main conflict, you, I guess, could make that interesting, but not in that way. And not in the way that I think people have seen several dozen times over the course of their furry reading careers.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess partly this is, we've already sort of enjoined our listeners to demand better fiction, but this is sort of turning it around on the writers and saying, a lot of people ask us, where can you find critiques? Where can we get people to critique your work? And we do tell them, go to FA, go to Poe Tigress's Thursday prompts, because the group that does that is at least moderately interested in writing for the most part. There's some good writers in there, but don't post stuff and then take the comments and go completely by them, because you're preaching to a choir in some sense.
Yeah.
And different people do have different tastes, and that doesn't mean that something's illegitimate because you disagree with someone.
Right. And, somebody telling you that your story is the best thing they've ever read, if it's your, first draft of your story, then probably have to discount that a little bit. Yeah. But also if they tell you, oh, this story is complete shit, you could discount that too. And I guess what I'm saying is you have to learn to be a good judge of your own work. And the way you do that is by reading good books, learning to recognize good narrative structure, good storytelling, good characters, and being able to look at your own work objectively with a critical eye and going back to fix the things that are lacking in it.
Who was it that said that a writer has to think he's the greatest writer in the world and the worst writer in the world? I forget who that was. They said, when you're writing it, you have to think you're the greatest writer in the world, so that you have the confidence to move on and the faith in your work to finish the whole thing. Once it's done, then you have to think you're the worst writer in the world, so that you have the humility necessary to correct it and fix the errors and actually make it good. I think a lot of people only get one or the other halves of that equation. They either think that they're the best and they never want to go back and edit it and hone it and find the problems with the narrative structure or the grammar or what have you and make it a better work, or they think that they're so bad that they never finish anything, and so they're constantly stuck in this limbo of writing and rewriting and never putting out a finished product.
And I've seen people at both ends of that. I think there might be kind of a middle category where there's people who write and they recognize that it's not great, but they don't have the patience or the skill to go back and edit. And so they kind of put it out there and they say, well, it's pretty good. And, it's the best I can do. And because they don't want to do any more work on it.
You want that payoff right away. You've worked so hard on it, and then you just want to go out there and get the praise for it and move on. And that's a hard impulse to break, I think.
You're like, well, I'm done with the story. I want to post it right away so that when I wake up in the morning, I have 12 comments.
Exactly.
And 8 I came clicks.
And I'm guilty of that,
I know. I think we've all done that at one point or another. And I think, honestly, if I'm just writing out a little So Furry story for grins in between more serious projects, I'm like, just kind of, give me a prompt, give me a couple species and a setting and a prop and a, name of a profession or something, and I'll just write a quick story with sex in it, and I'll post it up there, and then it's just sort of a loosening up exercise, and I don't want to take it too seriously. And I've done that a few times too. But yeah, I mean, certainly you need to have the faith in yourself to push forward and get something done, and you need to have the objectivity to go back and look at what you've done and make it as good as you can.
And you still also need to be aware of, we said a lot, when people ask, how long should my story be? And we say, as long as it needs to be. There's something similar in, what you should have happen in a story. And I think that, once you've got a good handle on a story, it'll start to tell itself. And as the writer, you need to know what will serve the story and how to differentiate that between what you want to have happen, because sometimes they'll be different. Right. I have set out to write stories specifically because I've had a certain scene in mind, and by the time I get to that point in the story, I go, but that wouldn't happen that way.
Right.
And then you to change it. And you have to recognize that.
writing can have this kind of delirious momentum where you just kind of ride the wave of the story, and you want to take that all the way into the shore. But I think it's significant once you get to a point where you start to realize, I need another scene here. I don't want to write this scene, but I need to write this scene. And I think those moments are really good because I've had moments like that, and then I write the scene, and that scene suddenly becomes more prominent than any of the other scenes in the story, and it really brings out new elements and ideas that make that story great. So once you learn to recognize that your first impulse when writing is not always the best impulse, that's great. That's an important place to get to.
Oh, I like this character and I want them to be happy. And it's like, well, do you want them to be happy or do you want them to earn their happiness?
Exactly.
I mean, one of the things, okay, I'll be honest here. I am known for not always writing very happy stories. And that was true even from early on. And I remember when I was first, putting a lot of stories online and getting feedback from people, a lot of people would write to me and say, like, why do you have such bad things happen to your characters in your stories? And I'd respond, it's like, well, because then they have something to overcome and it's more gratifying when they get through it. And they're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm like, aha, it does, doesn't it? Take a lesson from this. If you read a story with character, X is like, hey, I want to do this. And then they go out and do it and it happens in the end. It's like, well,
yeah. It's not that interesting.
Yeah.
Wish fulfillment is pretty boring, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've had discussion with friends about fantasy stories with wish fulfillment where, the hero slays the dragon and gets to continue to live in the magical kingdom and gets to be with the princess and gets to keep using magical powers and saves the kingdom and so is going to be the hero for the rest of his life. And
you know what the problem with that is? The problem is that after we read that story, then we have to close it and we have to go back to our regular lives.
Yeah.
And then we feel cheated because we all know that life isn't like that. So what's more interesting for us is to know what we do with the fact that we don't have happily ever afters.
And the fact that you give up something in order to gain something else gives that something else more weight, gives it more value. We haven't talked about them much, but have you guys read the Prydain Chronicles?
Oh yes.
Yes, I love those.
Yeah. I love the ending.
It's fantastic.
It is the thing that I think of when I think of endings that do not meet the wish fulfillment.
Yeah.
I was really impressed with because there's 5 books, right? And the first is written in very, very simple, easy to read language, and it's meant these books grow with the readers. So the first is meant to be read when you're a kid, and the last is meant to be read when you're, in high school, when you're about to go out into the world. And the books chronicle the maturation of the protagonist, Taran.
Taran, yeah.
Yeah, and I think my favorite, actually, is the 4th book,
Taran
Wanderer.
Yeah. It's funny, as you mentioned that, I was remember, the first time I read them, I hated that the first time I read it. And then when I went back to it, it was like, this is brilliant.
Well, because, in Taran Wanderer, he's trying to find his vocation in life, and he tries all these things and he's able to get pretty good at them, but they don't make him happy. And the one thing that he can't, that he tries, that really does make him happy, he can't get good at it. He cannot be a master at it. He just doesn't have the ability. So it's about how he accepts that, how he comes to grips with the fact that, your desires in life and what is actually achievable for you are not always the same thing. And I read this when I was a kid, and it has stuck with me ever since. I've always remembered it. And that is a book that has had a serious impact on my life, and has had a serious impact because the character did not get what he wanted.
Yeah.
Because he, it's not wish fulfillment, and life is not wish fulfillment.
All of those books are even the first one, which is admittedly the most simplistic. It's it's not like, hey, we go on this crazy magical adventure and everything's cool. It's like, well, first they go on a quest and they give up, and then they do the next part and then they fail, and it's just like, wait a minute, this isn't how fantasy stories are supposed to go. And it's just like, well, you tried, you did the best you could. End of book.
So for our listeners who are not familiar with them, Prydain is Prydain.
They're written by Lloyd Alexander.
Written by Lloyd Alexander with 2 L's in Lloyd.
That's pronounced Floyd, I think.
Lloyd Alexander.
Yeah.
And they are the Book of
Three,
the Black Cauldron,
the Castle
of Lear,
Tower and Wanderer, and the High King.
High King. Yes. Wow, we're nerds.
No, these are fantastic.
They're fantastic books.
And they're Welsh, so.
Oh yes, all these Welsh names.
And there was never a Disney movie made out of any of them.
Yes, so
definitely not. No,
ever.
And if there were one made, it certainly would not be better than Robin Hood.
Actually, because I remember reading the Pride and Chronicles in grade school, and the Black Cauldron, where it's just all right, this is great. This is holy crap, that guy just died. It's I liked him. What's this? People don't die in children's stories. It's just
yeah, who knew Disney would not keep faithful to a book that involves throwing corpses into a cauldron to raise an army of the undead.
Yeah, they really picked an odd one to make the movie out of there, or to not make the movie out of.
Yes, because it never happened.
Never happened. And I'm being stared at by our producer Tech Wolf, which I think means we need to wrap up our discussion a little bit. So, I want to leave our listeners with something that I read today or yesterday. The great basketball coach John Wooden died yesterday, as of this recording of the podcast, and so there have, of course, been approximately 17 bazillion words written about him in the last 24 hours on the internet. But one of the quotes from he has a pyramid of success, which is not as goofy as it sounds, but one of the quotes from him that has actually stuck with me from the articles I've skimmed today is his definition of success. And he said, "Success is the peace of mind that comes from knowing you tried the best you can to be the best you can." And I think that's a lot of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Try as hard as you can, be the best that you can.
If you did it and it was easy, go back and try harder.
Do it again.
Yeah. If you think we're talking to you, we are. And
if you think we're not, we are.
No, not you. You.
But so I want to. Last thing I want to do is encourage our listeners to write in. So sorry, that was actually the next to last. But we're still looking for some things for people to write in for us to edit, and for our hacksaw rat to take his rusty hacksaw to. So write in a page or so of something you want us to run our little editing clause over, and we'll do that. You can reach us at unsheathedpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us as Unsheathed on FA. And I am Kyell on FA, Kyle Gold on Twitter, Kyle Gold on LiveJournal.
I am K.M. Hirosaki on all three.
I'm NotTube on FA and Twitter.
And I encourage y'all to write in. Thank you for the questions. Thanks especially to Storm Kitty for a letter that spawned an entire episode. And I hope that those of you listening have all found the answer. Good night, and keep writing.